as the sun began to set, painting the streets of Sacramento with golden hues. Eric Johnson was driving home after a long and stressful day at work. The fatigue slowly melted away as he adjusted the air conditioning, savoring the quiet of the moment. Little did he know, this ordinary journey would soon turn into a moment that changed everything. When the traffic light turned red, he slowed down and prepared to stop. But suddenly, the sound of a police siren blared from behind him. The flashing red and blue lights caused Eric to frown slightly, but he calmly pulled over to the side. Officer Jack Larson stepped out of the patrol car, exuding the confidence of someone who was accustomed to the power he held. He approached the car with a suspicious look in his eyes, a smug sense of self-assurance as if he had already predicted how things would unfold. "License and registration," Larson demanded in a cold tone. Eric, still calm, handed over his documents without saying a word. But in Larson's eyes, Eric could see scrutiny, as if the officer was searching for a reason to make things difficult. "Do you know why I stopped you?" Larson asked, not taking his eyes off Eric, as if his question was about more than just a traffic violation. Eric answered gently, "I'm not sure." Larson stood for a moment, his gaze growing more serious, as if searching for something more than a simple traffic mistake, something Eric couldn't immediately figure out. The atmosphere began to shift, not just because of a car being stopped. Eric could feel the tension in the air, but he didn't waver. Larson had no idea that Eric had been preparing for this moment for a long time, not just for a simple traffic stop. Eric wasn't just a driver, he was the one who would put an end to the mistaken assumptions and injustice that Larson was about to face. But Larson didn't understand that. Larson didn't stop. He kept asking questions that clearly had nothing to do with the traffic violation. "Where are you from?" Larson asked, his expression changing as he looked at Eric's documents. "I moved here a few months ago," Eric answered, maintaining his calm. But Larson didn't stop there. He started to act more suspicious, moving closer and standing taller, never taking his eyes off Eric. "Where are you in such a hurry to go?" Larson continued asking. "Home," Eric replied, still maintaining his composure, though a subtle tension was starting to appear. Larson stood there, staring into Eric's eyes as though he was looking for something, a sign, a movement, anything that could justify extending this stop, because he could clearly sense that Eric wasn't someone easy, like others he had stopped. Eric wasn't afraid, he didn't appear panicked or anxious. But that's what bothered Larson, the fact that he couldn't recognize the fear he had seen in others. Eric stood tall, never breaking eye contact with Larson, his gaze quietly but powerfully intense. "Is there anything else, officer?" Eric's question was a gentle challenge, not rushed nor fearful. Larson took a step back, rummaging through his pocket to retrieve Eric's documents, and showed a slight hesitation as he slowly folded them, unnecessarily dragging the process. "Step out of the car," Larson said, his tone more forceful. Eric looked him in the eye and asked, "Is there a specific reason for that?" Larson shot him a glare, his eyes flashing with barely concealed anger, then lowered his voice. "I asked you to get out of the car. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The tension in the air rose, but Eric did not back down. He opened the car door and stepped out, showing no fear, but maintaining a calm demeanor, completely in control of the situation. Larson watched his every move, but couldn't detect the trembling or fear he had seen in others when facing him. Eric stood tall, exuding a confidence that could easily be mistaken for someone in a formal meeting. What Larson didn't understand was that every step Eric took was that of someone who had prepared for every possible scenario. And at that moment, Larson started to realize he had made a big mistake. Eric didn't let Larson continue to drag things out. When Larson instructed him to place his hands on the hood, he complied without hesitation but didn't forget to ask a question. "Do I look like someone carrying a weapon?" Eric's voice was soft, but the implication was clear. Larson, glancing at Eric, saw nothing but calm in his eyes, and it made him uncomfortable. In Larson's mind, a storm was brewing, but he couldn't show concern. He began hastily searching Eric, his hands moving roughly over his body, as if trying to find a reason to confirm his suspicion. But Eric didn't flinch, didn't change his stance. He stood firm, not moving an inch, despite Larson's deliberate slow pace and occasional unnecessary motions. as if trying to provoke a reaction. But all Larson received was silence and an inexplicable calm from Eric. When the search ended, Larson took a step back, reluctantly muttering, "Clear," as though he had failed to find a legitimate reason to keep Eric there. When Larson stepped back, his hand still resting on his belt, Eric firmly continued, "We all have the right to ask for transparency and fair treatment. No matter who you are or who I am. That doesn't change." Eric stepped forward, never taking his eyes off Larson, his gaze sharp and determined, unmistakable to anyone watching. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" Eric asked. Larson remained silent, standing there with a tense expression, his lips tightly pressed. He knew, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the truth that Eric had just exposed. Eric was not just an ordinary person, he was someone with power. Someone who could change the very system Larson was serving. And this realization made Larson unable to forget this encounter. At that moment, Eric casually raised his coat and pulled out his badge, an internal affairs badge from the Sacramento Police Department. Larson watched every move Eric made, his eyes widening, the tension clear on his face. "Here," Eric simply said, "I'm the head of internal affairs for the Sacramento Police Department, and I will be reporting your behavior." Larson's face paled for a moment, his eyes shifting from the badge to Eric's face. Unable to believe what had just happened, the two stood silently, as if time had stopped in that moment. Eric didn't rush, but when he turned to walk away, Larson finally understood. He had made an irreversible mistake. As Eric got back into his car, Larson stood there, his gaze still shifting from the badge to Eric's face, unable to look away. The feeling of suddenly having his power stripped away, of being quietly but decisively defeated, began to swell inside him. Larson quietly turned back to his patrol car, his hand still shaking as he grabbed the radio, unsure of what to do next. While Larson was still confused, Eric gently opened his car door, started the engine, and quietly drove off. But the most important thing wasn't what happened right now, but what would come after. The lingering silence in the air made Eric realize that this wasn't just a routine stop, but a pivotal moment in his life, a moment in which he had to draw the line between power and justice. The next day, when Eric returned to his office at the police department, he began reviewing Larson's records. The reports of unprofessional behavior, complaints about unfair handling, and unresolved incidents all came together to paint an ugly picture of Larson. Eric sat down, staring at the reports, feeling as though he wasn't just facing a police officer but a system that had long neglected these issues. In a meeting with his superiors, Eric didn't remain silent. He recounted the incident with Larson, not just to clarify one wrong act, but to point out the deeper problems within the system. "We can't let behaviors like this continue," Eric said, his voice firm, without a hint of doubt. "We need to clean everything up, not just address individual cases, but face the entire culture that has allowed these mistakes to persist." Finally, when Eric stood before the officials in a public meeting, he called for a complete overhaul of the system. He demanded a review of police training, procedures, and accountability. "If we can't keep ourselves clean, how can we expect the community to trust us?" Eric said bluntly. Eric's words shifted the atmosphere in the room. He wasn't just fighting for justice for himself, but for a fairer system. Every eye in the room turned to him, not just because of his decisiveness but also because of how he viewed and was changing a system that had left so many wounds in society. In that moment, Eric knew that what he was doing wasn't just a personal victory, but the first step in a journey to renew justice and fairness in the police force.